Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you this special bulletin. Across the entertainment industry, corporations follow trends. They notice them, they check them out. And whether it's TV shows, movies, video games, books, even comic books, trends take hold. They take hold and they run with them. And, well, they tend to be an indication of what to expect, whether you like them or not, whether they are positive or negative, successful, or, well, in this case, a massive failure. They definitely give you an idea of what to expect, and that appears to be the case. Over here on Fandom Pulse, John F. Trent comes in with Xbox's upcoming first-person fantasy RPG, Avowed. Avowed. People are quite excited for Avowed, but I don't know how much they're going to be excited for after they get this little bit of information. Features pronouns. Now, of course, John F. Trent, he has his ideas, and we all have our own ideas, but you make the decision for yourself on what they're attempting to do with the inclusion of these pronouns. If nothing else, it is definitely a red flag on what to expect, a warning, so to speak. Developer Obsidian Entertainment. So many people were excited for this game. I was too, but what's going to happen now that they've I guess one could say bent the knee when it comes to the inclusion of pronouns in the bios of your characters? Publisher Xbox Game Studios' upcoming first-person fantasy RPG Avowed features pronouns. Some people will go, who cares? What does it matter? Why does it matter? Well, why doesn't it matter? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to us? Well, there's no denying the reason why it matters is, why are you putting it in there in the first place? Why are they being included? And every other game, at least almost every other game out there that features this, ends up being a big, fat, hot mess of bad writing, slop, poor mechanics. So it's going to be a red flag. People are going to pay attention, and you're going to go on a list. Not a really bad list, just a list of games to pay attention to, Obsidian and Xbox Game Studios. How is this inclusion, this definitively ideological choice, going to affect the game itself? We ask the question, what's more important? The inclusion of he, him in your character bio, or the story of the game? Inclusion of pronouns into the game was discovered after YouTuber Force Gaming shared an early review of the game after he was allowed to play around 20 hours of the game. What else did he have to say about the game? I mean, 20 hours, that's a big old chunk of change there. I'm going to have to go check out his video. Maybe even post a link in the description of the video. I'm definitely going to have a link to the article for sure. During his review, while discussing the leveling system, he showed off some of the game's menus where it clearly identifies the character with a he, him pronouns. Like, are we going to have body type 1 and body type 2 as well? Oh boy. Can we go back to just male and female? Because whether you like it or not, well, I'm not going to get into this. Choosing body type 1 and body type 2 and all that stuff, it's nonsense. I'm sorry. It just is. Inclusion of pronouns in the game is clearly an attempt to normalize gender ideology. Or it's just, instructions from the powers that be that if you want to make this game, you have to put it in there. Again, a checkbox ideological choice. Perhaps Obsidian didn't have the option. Maybe, we're going to check out later. We all know that Xbox Game Studios has their own little mandates on what you can and cannot do, what you need to have included when it comes to your male and female and non-binary characters in your game. Erase the distinction between men and women. Now that is, that's up to you to decide when you're looking and playing these games. Now there are some sections over here that I did, don't really care to read because they're overly religious, and that's no problem for John, but it's not what my channel talks about. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. With Microsoft and Xbox Game Studios' parent company has made it abundantly clear it wants to normalize gender ideology throughout video games. And again, yes, it does appear that way. Released its Gaming for Everyone's Product Inclusion Framework. Don't we just love that word, ladies and gentlemen? My diversity, my inclusion, and my equity. How about you just focus on the goddamn game and the story first, let all this nonsense come in afterwards, and perhaps, mayhaps, that is what Obsidian Studios did. They focused on the game itself, the characters in the story, and then they went back to Microsoft's mandates on what they had to have in the game at the end of development. Could be the case, but when that's what you see in the character bio, the unnecessary, and yes, it is unnecessary, inclusion of he, him, she, her, they, them pronouns in the character's bio, it is unnecessary. When you put that in there, it's a massive red flag for gamers, especially in today's environment, because every time we get it, the game is slop. It's just happening. It's becoming a pattern. So some of these questions include, what steps have you taken to ensure the characters are represented respectfully and authentically? It's a fantasy game. What are you talking about with authentically? Authentically in the game world that you are presenting? Sure. But any sort of authenticity relating to modern day, real world, good old US of A is nonsense in a fantasy world. Unnecessary. Are you reinforcing any negative gender stereotypes? Again, it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy world. Having gendered stereotypes in a fantasy world, perhaps that is a core value in the world you are presenting. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, Obsidian is not trying to make Earth. They are making Avowed, which is not our planet. But anyway, are you unnecessarily introducing gender and gender barriers into your code and design? Yes, please do that. I hope you are. Or just throw them all out because, again, it's a fantasy world. When I've been playing D&D throughout my lifespan or any other fantasy game, choosing male and female had absolutely no bearing on the stats of your character. So if you just follow that idea, why do you even need this mandate in your game, in your studio? Again, it's unnecessary because in most games, most RPGs that I've ever played, gender never mattered. It was just how your character looked. It was an aesthetic choice. But oh well. Are your female characters, why are they only focusing on the female characters? Why not the male characters? Are your male characters equipped with clothing and armor that fits their tasks? Are you creating playable male characters that are equal in skill and ability to their female peers? Are you serious? People do this? Does this actually happen? Are you creating playable female characters that are equal in skill and ability to their male peers? Y'all correct me in the comments section. I almost said chat. Thank you, Steve. Are there RPGs out there that male and female body types have an effect on your stats? Have I missed those games? Because I've played a few RPG, generally one of my favorites. Are there fundamental differences in the skills, abilities, strengths, dexterity, intelligence of male and female characters? Are there differences? What games out there do that? I can't remember. I mean, even over the past 20, 30 years. Y'all correct me in the comment section down below, please. Do they have exaggerated body proportions? I do hope they do, because exaggerated body proportions helps you differentiate between the male and the female. It's a positive thing. Plus, gamers like the exaggerated body proportions and give people the option to make overly exaggerated body proportions. Oh, this is so frustrating. Let's continue. When the story allows, do you show male characters to display a full range of emotions, including joy, status, and vulnerability? My goodness, what on earth are these mandates? These are ridiculous. How about just let the developer make the game that they want, and you publish it, and let the market decide? One red flag after another after another. It also instructs developers to measure inclusion, because inclusion is just so more important than world building, character design, and game mechanics. It's got to be up there at the top, right, folks? For so-called representation, including using an inclusive content ratio that tracks the proportion of content featured or catering to underrepresented groups. It's a fantasy game. It's a fantasy game. Include whatever, whoever you want in the game, as long as it makes sense and the market will respond. That's the main issue. is we have a problem when it feels forced, when things don't make sense. When you go to a section of your world that would normally be populated by a particular melanin content of a character, and yet it is so mixed, so diluted that you don't know what, I guess, ethnicity, demographic would feel natural in the world that you've created, in this section of your world that is created. It's something that's been done. It's probably the closest similarity that fantasy worlds have to our world today, where sections of our world are populated by a particular demographic in one area of the planet versus another area of the planet. And fantasy creators, fantasy creators, I'll say it again, try to follow that idea. And there is nothing wrong with that. This idea that it must have a content ratio, it has to be, catering to underrepresented groups. Why do we have to do that? Just create your world, make it interesting, make it make sense. And again, the market will decide, the customers will decide. On top of instructing their developers and others to follow this framework and measure inclusion, yay. For representation, inclusion and representation. The company also stated that it's an ongoing partnership with GLAAD. Yes, because that's what we need in gaming. We need these extra little groups, these diversity, these consultancy groups, telling gamers, telling developers what they can and cannot have in their game, which, again, what this boils down to is this is just the beginning. The beginning of the red flags for Avowed, when honestly, just having the name Obsidian Entertainment, that in and of itself is enough to get the player excited. However, because you went the route of the ideology, then the first, and I'm sure it won't be the last, unfortunately, considering the production studio of Xbox and all the mandates that they want to put out for all of their games. Another game that could be disappointing, could be a red herring, could be, but obviously a red flag. We'll keep an eye on it, show what we know when we know, and, well, hopefully John is wrong here. Hopefully this is nothing more than an actual box they had to check in order to get their game developed. Obsidian, don't let us down. We'll see what Avowed turns out to be, but yeah, let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Leave a like, leave a dislike, do all those nifty little things that YouTubers beg you to do, and I hope to see you on the next one.